Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, that Sunday capper was not you get 4 days into Thanksgiving leftovers. Kind of get a little dicey. I felt like that's kind of how Sunday was for the Colts, and blowing yet another double-digit lead and losing to the arch nemesis that is Tom Brady. I'm Kevin Bowen, back. Chris Presley across the way. The month of December is upon us, and the Colts are 6-6. We'll look at the big picture today. We'll obviously unpack a whole lot of what happened in the 38-31 loss, because there is good, there is bad within that, and I think that's probably what adds to the frustrating aspect. First off, Chris, I know a busy week for you over at Lucas Oil, IHSA State Finals, 6 games over Friday and Saturday. Your help with Network Indiana there. So Thanksgiving good, weekend good?
Thanksgiving was good. Weekend was great. Obviously, congrats to Cathedral, your alma mater, for winning another state championship. But yeah, it was fun to be at Lucas Oil, being up in the press box. It was kind of funny. I don't know the gentleman who was behind me at one point, but when we were up in the press box, he's on the phone with someone. It's like, I'm looking straight down. This is higher than NRG. This is higher than MetLife. I've never been in a press box this high, as you can attest to, because I texted you about it. But yeah, it was good. Thanksgiving was great. Good to see family. It's always nice to recharge the batteries a little bit. And even though I work technically Friday and Saturday, it's not really work when you're going to watch a football game.
Yeah, and there's some very competitive games as well, especially that 6A game between Center Grove and Westfield. It is, I think, the Colts and NRG, probably the two highest views. Now, it's better than, like, New England. You got an end zone view, which is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Buffalo, an end zone view. I think Washington's a bad view. Tennessee's got a great view right at midfield. But, yeah, it's always something that I guess I just didn't realize until I started traveling for road games. But, yeah, the Colts view, not great in terms of height, but it is nice from an all-22. Like, you watch the Ashton Doolin play, and you see it happen as soon as the snap happens. Or, like, Isaiah Rodgers' kick return to end the game. I'm saying to Chap, I sit next to Mike Chappell, like, as soon as Rodgers kind of hits that crease, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, he might do this. Boy, that would have been a story. But let's get into overall thoughts.
Okay.
Before we get into what I liked, what I didn't like from yesterday. Yesterday stings. It stings because it's Tom Brady. It stings because it's a double-digit lead. And it stings because you now are in the boat of you can't afford to squander anything else. Like, you could play great against Arizona and lose that game on Christmas. That means you can't have another dud.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't have a bad game down the stretch. And I think really the Colts have avoided a bad game in quite some time. Like, it's amazing. I'm sitting here and thinking to myself, the Colts have had 9 straight games where they've led by double digits. Now 6-3 in those 9 because you've blown 3 of them. Which again, that is like, I'm trying to provide it from a glass half full view, because I'm not just trying to like hand you the glass half full. It's legit. Like, I'm like, guys, the Colts have had 9 straight games, double-digit leads. But then it also is, what the why do we need this help down the stretch? If you're a Colts fan, saying that. So yeah, I think that is what is particularly frustrating. The Bucs lost a lot of starters, early in that game. I always viewed this, Chris, as kind of a house money game. Yeah, I thought to myself, coming out of that Jacksonville game, all right, 2 games close out November, Buffalo and Tampa. You take the split. You hopefully get the Buffalo game versus the Tampa game because it's the AFC game, and then you run into December and you see what happens. So, I think big picture, if we can kind of step back for a second, this is the most realistic, best scenario you could have hoped for from the Colts. Granted, again, the frustrating part is, holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're up 2 scores. You're on the verge of going up 3 scores. And think about that. In 2 of these 3 losses, you've been up double digits and blown it. Double-digit leads in the second half of 2 of those games. Baltimore, of course, in the fourth quarter. Right. A huge lead. And then obviously yesterday with Tampa there as you're going in for that 3-score lead. I feel like I mentioned this at the start, but I also want to throw in the caveat of, like, we won't focus too much on this. Like, they've built these leads. They are a good football team. They don't have a record where you can truly appreciate that stuff. You know, when you are 6-6,
Yeah.
you can't harp on that too much just because, you know, you got to go 4-1. It looks like, I don't know, 3-2 maybe. The Colts actually have the conference tiebreaker nicely in their favor. Now, granted, some head-to-head tiebreakers, you know, with the Raiders and the Patriots can still be decided. But to me, the game kind of boils down to this. You have dominated turnover margin all year long. You've dominated the penalty game all year long. -3 in turnover margin, basically -4. I mean, let's say Pierre Desir drops that pick at the end. That's
And of course, it's
-4.
Pierre Desir.
Right, who got roasted several times, but yes, he does make that play there late. And then penalties. I think you had 22 yards more penalties. That's not a huge number, but still, I thought there were some critical ones within that. So, yeah, man, it's... You know, after the Miami game, I remember talking about this. You know, after the San Francisco game, though, we talked about it of like, all right, you make some mistakes, you can get away with it against bad football teams, mediocre football teams. You do that against Tom Brady and the Bucs, you will not get away with that. And that, to me, is what sums up yesterday. You muff a punt like Nyheim Hines did against Miami and Jacoby Brissett, you can still win. You muff one against Tom Brady and the Bucs inside your own 20, you're not overcoming that.
Right.
And so I think it all boils down to turnovers and the penalty game. Colts have been so good with it all year, and it's not like they were even average with it yesterday. They were below average with it, and I thought that was costly.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to sit behind the biggest group of Tampa Bay fans probably in the stadium yesterday. So
now, are we talking legit Bucs fans, or are we talking Tom Brady fans?
No, traveled from Tampa.
Wow, why?
It was one of those, like...
I love that, but why?
It was one of those, like, chanting Tampa. Someone would say Bay, even during the national anthem, like...
Oh, gosh.
Those kind of fans? Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
So when I sat down, I was like, this is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, that is... you know, we had a little bit of a national anthem issue, right? The mic wasn't on or something?
I sang.
Yeah, I was going to say, all of a sudden, you know, you can't really hear it in the press box. But
Yeah,
all of a sudden,
it is
like,
kind of muffled in the press box.
The crowd is singing very loudly, and
Yeah.
then I put 2 and 2 together there. So that's when I kind of knew at the start of the day, I'm like, Tom Brady's in the building.
But they said, like, the first muff punt, and we only got 3 out of it, which football's football. You can't score on every possession. I understand that. Those first 2 drives, they were kind of looking at each other like, we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts could have had a bigger lead early.
Yeah, they're like, we're still fine.
Right.
So,
yeah, you know, we'll obviously get to Jonathan Taylor and his usage, and like that's on the blame list. You're not going to hear me in the next hour say that's 1 or 2 on the blame list. It's not. It's frustrating. It's a problem. But I think at times we run away from blaming players and immediately blame the head coach or whatever. We can give blame to several different people in parts of the game.
yeah.
But for me, Chris, it's going to start with 2 really specific plays.
Okay. Well, let's start with those two specific. Wow, I can't speak here on a Monday morning. Plays. Obviously, the last 3 weeks, we've been fortunate enough to talk about what you do like.
Yeah.
After a loss, we talk about what you don't like. Let's jump into those 2 plays.
Yeah, let's start with what happened first, kind of go in chronological order, and that was the Eric Fisher strip sack there in the third quarter. You ended the first half so well with that touchdown. You know, I thought that was a big sequence. You know, Tampa had scored there late in the first half. Fournette goes in from a couple yards out. 17-14. Colts answer. Big drive. 14 plays, 75 yards. Go for it on that 4th down to Hilton, and that was a huge score for me at that moment of the game.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the Colts get the ball to start the third quarter, and I'm thinking to myself, boy, Chris, you score here. I know you've blown 3-score leads before, but I think it's over.
I do too.
Now, if I would have tweeted it, of course, people would have just, tried to contact Jack Dorsey to get me off Twitter, although I thought I saw Jack Dorsey's gone. Could be wrong there on that. Anyways, 1st and 10, Tampa 20-yard line, just like the Baltimore game. You know, you're in the red zone. Eric Fisher allows a strip sack. It's you should be able, I think, to leave your left tackle on an island on a first down. Like, that should be there. I know Shaq Barrett's a great player, and I thought he just had his way with Fisher. Bull rushes, speed rushes. I mean, what an individual effort by Barrett on the play. He strips it, sacks him, and he gets back on it.
Right.
He did everything.
Yeah.
You get back on it, you're still in field goal range. It's fine there. Just an incredible play, and, this is Fisher. This is what we've seen. Chris Bauer took a risk in signing him, and I would say it hasn't worked out. There's been nice moments in the run game. I think there's been times in the pass game where you haven't seen it, but when you're facing the upper echelon rushers, we've seen too many of these plays where they are like catastrophic type plays. Wentz has held on to a few that you've gotten away with. He had no chance to hold on to that one. Honestly, I'd have to go back and watch. It looked like a touchdown was about to happen. I thought, was it Granson? Somebody was wide open. I guess Granson caught the ball before. I thought it was him. And that just adds to it. I thought that was just a fatal error of when you have turnovers, they're obviously big, but I just thought several of the Colts ones yesterday were just big turnovers. So that's a first play for me because, again, I think you go up 3 scores there. And, I know usually I do the under-the-radar play. That's not very under the radar, but as soon as that happened, I just said a chap. I go, circle it. It's just, you just felt it. Tampa Bay wasted little time. I think they had 1 third down on their next drive, but they quickly moved and got that touchdown. And from then on, it was game on at that point. The other play is the Nyheim Hines muff. Early fourth quarter, you finally, I think it was the only stop you had in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. You had forced a 3 and out. Yeah. And Hines muffs it. They get 3 out of it, but that was still just a big 3 in that, they were able to push it, up to a touchdown later on. And Hines, again, hey, you had the muff against Miami. You overcome it. You can't. This is the blame for me. The blame starts right there. Eric Fisher, Nyheim Hines. 2 guys that, and sure, if you want to take it another step up, you're like, well, Chris Ballard, okay, Ballard made the mistake with Fisher. All right, fine. You want to throw blame there, throw blame there. In the course of 60 minutes of football, what we saw on Sunday, Fisher and Hines made catastrophic errors. And when you're playing legit opponents, you're trying to string wins together. That was the question entering Sunday was, can you beat multiple playoff teams? Because at some point this season, you want to play in January, you have to beat multiple playoff teams. And just 2 massive errors by guys that are kind of, I've had some questions this year. Hines hasn't been as solid as I think you would like him to be. There's been a couple drops. Obviously, his usage has been a bit confusing at times too, but just hasn't been as consistent. We know he had the fumbling issues as a rookie during training camp, but for the most part, he's been pretty reliable. But when you muff 2 in a year, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but man.
No, and as you mentioned, and even before I was in the seat when Joey was here, always been a Nyheim Hines fan on the podcast.
Yeah.
We all agree.
Yeah.
You talked about it earlier in the year. There's times where now sometimes people can't get up to go to the bathroom during extra points because of the kickers. I honestly got up and started to walk away during the punt because I was like,
should we blame you?
I was like, he's got it. You can blame me if you want. But I was like, we're going to get it. It's going to be a fair catch. I hear the roar, and I turn around, and I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah. And a great play by Scotty Miller to get on that ball as well. So that's where it starts. Before we're going to get into Reich, before we get into Jonathan Taylor and that usage, it comes down to huge turnovers, quantity and quality of those turnovers.
Yeah.
And folks, we can blame players. I mean, the ratio of tweets that I get, do you see any Twitter questions about Eric Fisher or Nyheim Hines? What, maybe one?
Oh, yeah, it's
like maybe?
It's all Frank.
Right. And it's just like, I feel like we are so quick to immediately blame the head coach, and like the players can deserve some blame too. Was Frank Reich perfect yesterday? By no means, and we're about ready to hit on that.
Right.
But he also helped engineer an offense that scored 21 points in 1 quarter. He had 24 at half. That's a huge number against a very legit defense. So blame to go around. Certainly, for me, starts with Fisher, starts with Hines.
Yeah. And like they say, you can't preach that every man on the team, every man needs to step up, but then blame just goes to one. I mean, it's a team effort.
We've questioned accountability here, and I think accurately we've questioned that before. So we will hold those players accountable for such mistakes.
And you know that they know too. You know Eric Fisher sitting there, and Nyheim Hines this morning sitting there like, damn, man,
1,000%. So I feel like we do this after every loss, but again, if you're going to make me rank a blame game, Fisher, Hines 1, 2, and then Reich and the usage of Taylor would be 3, and there's a big gap between 1 and 2 and going down there. Like, we just want to write off what you did early on in that game and totally forget about what the offense did.
All right, so we talked about 1 and 2. Let's jump to 3 because obviously we'll talk about it extensively through Twitter questions, but forgetting about going to Jonathan Taylor. We just abandoned the run there for a time being, and those could be checks. They might not be.
Right.
What's your thought there?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So let's try and make this as clear as possible. So Taylor had a stretch of 26 straight dropbacks by Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
In that span, it was actually 26 minutes of football, ironically enough, that transpired then. Taylor touched it twice. Now, let's mention that you had a 2-minute drill in there, which Hines is usually on the field in the first half. Totally get that. So that's I think it's 8 plays that you have to take out of there. Why did Frank Reich want to throw it so much? He wanted to attack Tampa's corners. He knew Tampa's corners were banged up. You just brought up Pierre Desir a little bit earlier in the pod. That's a very banged-up position group for them.
Yep.
The Colts moved it a good amount during that stretch. Now, I would also sit here and say you moved it. You also had some wild down and distance situations that you picked up. So I don't think it was like as smooth of a move. It's one of those things where you're just like, how many 3rd and 10s can you survive?
Jack Doyle just coming to the rescue.
Doyle, I think Pittman had one. Hell, Wentz outrunning Ndamukong Suh to the sideline on that 3rd and 15. Like, it just felt like to me like, oh boy, if you keep on doing this sooner or later. Now, granted, the 1st and 10 strip by Fisher came on a first down. The whole Wentz to Pittman, look, pick, underthrown ball, yes. I don't have an issue with it too much. I mean, Brady throws the ball down the sidelines, it gets picked off. Like, I don't have too much of an issue with that. For those curious why, I'm not bringing that up. All right, Taylor, 4 carries for 2 yards in the first quarter. Chris, didn't take, I think, anyone in the building long to see 347 pounds of Vita Vea making an impact in the middle. Where we have all of a sudden ignored, and when I say we, I'm basing this off Twitter,
right?
Which is, gosh, boy, no wonder I have more gray hair than the average 32-year-old. Jonathan Taylor, 4 carries for 2 yards in the first quarter. The dude averaged 5 yards per carry in the second quarter. I feel like we want to forget that. We just act like the whole first half was bad running. But I am such a believer with the run game. It is a boxing match. It is what happens in round 1, not necessarily going to be there in round 4. The wear and tear, the attrition. They're subbing guys into the game, subbing guys out of the game. They got banged up early on in that game. Devin White was in and out of that game early on. They also lost a couple other of guys. To me, when you threw it pretty well in the second quarter, you had some sprinkled in runs that I think helped you in that area. I also felt like this game, a big reason why I ended up going with the Colts is I thought the short week would catch up to Tampa. And I think you kind of saw that late in the game when you gave the ball back to Taylor. You saw what a short week can do to you. And I keep on coming back to this with Taylor. You have got to force some touches to him. And I know that is a very dangerous thing. 26 passes, an astonishing number. 26 dropbacks in a row, I should say. Like you mentioned earlier, there's some run-pass options in there that, Carson decided to throw on. I am by no means acting like the Colts should have ran it 26 times in that stretch, or that number needs to be 50-50. I get why Frank Reich wanted to throw. You had some success in the third quarter. My bigger issue is your best player touches it twice.
Yeah.
In a span that's nearly half the game. Taylor has got to touch it more. He's too dynamic, and you're not dynamic enough at receiver and tight end to make up for it. We had Jeff Saturday on the morning show today, and I asked Jeff, I'm thinking, walk me through what you guys did at the line of scrimmage when the numbers weren't in your favor. He said, look, there were still times where we gave it to Edge. We know edges, and they had Marvin and Reggie. Mm-hmm. It's not like God bless the Colts pass catchers, but they don't have those guys. So I go back to the San Francisco game, Chris. Early in that game, Taylor has a flat-out awful drop on a second down in the flat. Terrible drop. It's now 3rd and 15. That 3rd and 15, that down and distance, that screams Nyheim Hines on the field. They stick with Taylor. They give Taylor the ball on a screen, and he takes it 70-some yards for a touchdown. Like, those guys have got to touch the ball more than others. By no means am I saying you must run it X amount of time, or this, that. There still needs to be times over the course of a game where even if the numbers aren't perfectly in your favor, you do run the football. If you look at that final drive, Chris, I know there's some thought out there that, the Bucs had light boxes on that final drive. They did not have any lighter boxes than they did.
No, they didn't. No.
You just ran it right at them, and you moved the football.
Yep.
I would have liked to have seen that in the third quarter a little bit more. I get that you moved it, but how those drives ended, I think, is a product of not having a little bit more balance. To me, this passing offense is not built to sustain over 4 quarters. It's just not. Obviously, you had a lot of success with it, but thinking that game plan is going to be there and needs to be there for 4 quarters, I can't go there.
It's just also a little crazy to me that you go from one week where the national media, NFL's Twitter account changes their profile picture and stuff to Jonathan Taylor, or their header image, I should say.
Right.
And you have the hard knocks of he's one cut away from always to the next week where it's completely opposite. And I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor, even though he's in his second year, should get in the face of the quarterback, but do you think at times, kind of like we on the morning show here, we have the Jeff Saturday, Peyton Manning kind of hilarious quote going back and forth, should Jonathan Taylor give me the ball?
Yeah, it's not Taylor. Like, he's not going to do that. So it should not be on the player to do that. That's where Frank Reich, I think, has got to realize. It was wild to me that Frank said after the game he didn't realize that Taylor hadn't touched it during that span. It's kind of like, dude, I get you're calling plays, but you more than anyone should realize that the guy's got to get in the game. And his playing time was there. 71% of the snaps, that's a nice number. It was just those touches were not there.
Yeah.
I think a couple other things before we move on. The Bucs have a really good run defense. They're not the 2000 Ravens or the 85 Bears. If you look at the last handful of games, Tampa Bay has allowed, I want to say the number, I think it's 4.8 yards per carry. It's a big number.
Right.
In 4 of their last 5 games. So this is not some, again, vaunted, you can't run on them. And I go back to what happened in the first quarter, and then boom, what happens in the second quarter? You found more success in the second quarter. So where's that in the third quarter?
Yeah.
And
to the people listening, if that's the Eagles, the Bears, the Saints, or I should say the Giants, Washington, Saints, and Bears.
Not.
So you're not.
Yeah,
it's
that's
those
not
aren't
Bo Jackson, Walter Payton, and
right.
Jim Brown. Yeah. Can you imagine the Titans giving the ball to Henry twice in 30 minutes? It's just. So, again, this is not at the top of the list for me that cost you, but it is concerning because it's a repeatable offense that we've seen made this year. We saw it in the Baltimore game, not as much in that Tennessee game when you blew the lead, but certainly in that Baltimore game. And I think that is what frustrates fans the most. And honestly, I think that's why fans immediately blame Reich. It's because it's this obvious thing that you just alluded to, Chris. It's Jonathan Taylor. He's the MVP candidate. He's getting all this attention. They've upticked his playing time majorly here in recent weeks. So it's like, they are committing to him. And I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more balance. You still are moving it fine through the air, but a little bit more balance / it is 28 touching the football, and he can turn a 10-play drive into a 4-play drive. And that's where I think I am particularly frustrated with this situation.
Right.
So I know we got a lot of Twitter questions, so we can probably save any other thoughts for that on this specifically. But I did want to mention it. Again, tremendous. That second quarter, maybe the best quarter of the year, certainly passing offense-wise. But let's not forget, you had a handful of carries in there where Taylor averaged 5 yards per carry. Like, that plays into it a little bit as well. Yeah.
I don't know what your guys' thoughts were up in the booth, Kev. The last one we're going to touch on, I know my friends and I were talking about it. Tom Brady, the clock, final drive for Tampa. Yeah. Did you guys feel that as well?
You know, it's funny. Mike Chappell looked at me before the drive and goes, your level of confidence in the defense. If you'd asked me at the start of the day, Brady takes over with 3 minutes to go, tie game, and that same question, I would have said minimal. I actually had some confidence at that point in the defense. Maybe it was DeForest Buckner centralized, and like Buckner was making several big plays after that injury scare in the first half. So I'm thinking to myself, Brady has looked human at moments in this game. I mean, early on in the game, that passing offense had nothing in sync. And sure enough, Brady, and I find it fitting, and, you know, the week that LeBron and Brady are both in Indianapolis, they both do it to us like they've done it, you know. Boy, that just sounds weird saying it out loud. But, you know, for our generation, we've watched LeBron and Brady more than anyone.
Absolutely.
At their respective peaks, and they have probably burned us, I would say, combined more than any other market. I don't know if anyone else kind of comes top of mind, but I would say we are the market that's received the brunt of it the most. And LeBron did it with perimeter shots last Wednesday, not a whole lot of paint activity late in that game, and Brady did it by relying on a lot of Leonard Fournette on that final drive. I think that is what is so frustrating, is the lack of resistance on that final drive. Brady goes 5 of 5. Pretty dink and dunk with that 5 of 5. Fournette, a run of 11. A run of 13, or excuse me, a pass and run of 13, a run of 8, and obviously the 28-yarder to win it.
Yeah.
Just disappointing. Really disappointing. I get the Tampa Bay is a great offense and all of that, but you know what? If you want this defense to take another level, just a little bit more resistance, Chris. 8 plays on that drive, 5 first downs. I mean, they had a 2nd and 7, a 2nd and 4, and a 2nd and 2. No third downs.
Yeah.
And look at their second downs. A 2nd and 4, a 2nd and 2. Like, 2 of them that were, you know, exact situations. So that, I guess, is what's disappointing. When you see them give up 38, you think the defense played really bad. I don't sit here and say that. I don't. I think there were a lot of nice moments from the defense. But, man, that final drive.
Yeah.
Just pisses you off. There's your chance. You know, I think we're looking for chances of when do you take that giant step forward. Buffalo was a big step in the right direction. When do you take that bigger step? Do you have that in you? I thought that was a moment there that you could have. Hell, you got them behind the chains once. They had a 1st and 15 after that false start.
Yeah.
Fournette, draw for 11.
No, it's just tough. It's one of those games where, again, I went to school out of state, so I have a lot of out-of-state friends, and the eyes kind of started opening nationally after that Buffalo win. And then after the Colts got up yesterday, I get more texts rolling in like, oh, wow, this team is – you guys might be playoff bound. This is actually turning into a good team. And football's football. It happens. We lose, but –
And I think I go back to Thursday, Chris, and you bring up that Buffalo and the Raiders winning on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's just – this is where you – talk margin for error, and I am a firm believer. Look at the conference records. That's key. I really think that the Colts, if they go 4-1, will be in the playoffs. But you can play a really good 60 minutes of football, hell, against New England, certainly Arizona, certainly the Raiders, and you can lose.
Absolutely.
So if you lose that one, that means you got to win all the others. And that's what I think is concerning. This team hasn't played a bad game. And by bad game, I mean like over half the game is poor.
Yeah.
Something like that. In months. I mean, hell, you could argue since Carson Wentz was banged up early in the season. So do you look at that as they're better than the record says, or they're due? You know, it's just you can look at it, I guess, glass half full or glass half empty, whichever you want to. But, yeah.
Yeah, and right now it's going to be week to week, so we shall see. All right, we spent a decent amount of time talking about what you didn't like. Let's go about things that you actually did like. When we talked about that offensive flow early on and how we moved the ball.
Great.
Great.
I mean, how good is that ball to Doolin? You know, everything. Protection, the ball, the separation by Doolin. I mean, it's rare you see a guy catch a ball in stride 50 yards down the field. And Doolin did that. Just beautiful. Beautiful by Wentz. Protection was down. You know, you didn't have a first down in the first quarter. I know everyone's like, best half of the year. No, best quarter of the year. Like, you didn't do anything in that first quarter offensively. Your first down was 12:39 to go in the second quarter. You know what sparked the run game now that I'm looking at is when you went tackle eligible. You brought in big old Matt Pryor. He's a big dude.
Yeah, he is.
You went 8 with Taylor and then 5 with Taylor. And again, this is where I find it fitting. When you ran it a little bit, your pass game. That drive, the Doolin touchdown, 8 yards by Taylor, 5 yards by Taylor. So that's first down, 2 runs for 13 yards.
Yep.
Boom, Doolin, 62. Find a little balance. You can do some magical things off of it. I thought the second quarter was great. Doyle, obviously, I thought the run-pass option design was really good on that second touchdown. And we talked about that final drive there to end the first half. I thought that was – I looked at that as that's a game-changing time. That's what Brady does to other teams, and you just did it to him.
Right.
You got the chance to do the double dip, and hell, you almost got it until the Fisher strip sack. So, I definitely wanted to mention that. Like, you guys know, you guys are listeners to this podcast. You know what I think about Frank Reich as an offensive mind. I like him. I like the play calling. I like the designs, things like that. What's frustrating is the personnel usage, particularly with Taylor at times. But again, I thought yesterday was another indicator of more often than not, you have an advantage offensively. That's good defense. And you put up 21 in the second quarter. So I wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Second thing you liked, let's talk about the defensive play of DeForest Buckner and Darius Leonard.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we mentioned a couple guys on that side of the ball just because, again, I didn't think it was all bad. I was a little surprised to see Buckner not more in the stat sheet. 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit. So, I don't know. I feel like he was...
Big deflection, though,
yeah,
too.
That's a good point. Yeah, he had the big pass defense. That was around the red zone, wasn't it? I think it was maybe even a third down.
Yes, it was. Got him off the field. Oh, they had to kick the field goal. And
Right. That I wanted to mention Buckner. He thought, for those that listened to our morning show, I thought he was the X factor coming in the game. I thought if Buckner got to an all-pro level, you would win the game. And he was close, man. He was knocking on it, really knocking on it. And Leonard, the punch. Like, you imagine the preciseness, I don't know if that's a word, that you have to execute that. Like, and that was one where I know he kind of made the tackle after the fumble. He was not in his usual squared up position, and I'm doing the motion. When he usually punches, it's kind of the top down punch.
Yeah.
He's looking down at the ball carrier. He punches down to the ground. That one was like a little side jab. It's like his peripheral vision. All of a sudden, he can sense it and feel it. Punches it out of there. I mean,
I was hoping, was it the Scotty Miller? I can't remember. Someone was running down the sideline, and he did an uppercut from behind.
Yeah, he did try it later. And they got Pascal on it.
Yeah.
Later. It was, I'm in amazement. But why I really put Leonard on this list, Chris, is he also had that ball batted down. He made a play as well. And he had 15 tackles. I know tackles can be a misleading stat, and hell, I mean, some of those are probably tackling Gronk, 15 yards down the field. But I thought that was more of the 60-minute Leonard that we've kind of been waiting for a little bit there. So I just wanted to mention those two guys. I did think you saw your safety issues on full display. I thought Odom and Sendejo really struggled in that game, which is not surprising to me. And you knew Brady was going to pick on him. And he did. I mean, Gronk down the middle. Like, Gronk is a load, man.
Yeah, he is.
He's just a freaking load.
And, of course, again, it's one of those where, as Colts fans, we're like, Brady and Gronk, why?
I don't know.
Come on.
Yeah. No wonder Gronk had so many positive things to say about the Lucas Oil crowd after the game. He's like, has he ever lost here? So, yeah, I wanted to mention Buckner.
Yeah, he lost the Super Bowl here.
Right. Yeah. Colts game. Yes, he did, which is rejoice. I thought we were going to have a parade here in Indianapolis after that Super Bowl loss.
Do you think you talked about the 60-minute Leonard and the tackles. Is that some of it scheme, or do you think his ankle's starting to come back on the mend?
Yeah, I think a little bit of I'd say a little bit of on the mend. You had the 10-day break, and obviously the bye's coming up, so that should help him.
Yeah.
I still don't see maybe the sideline to sideline like explosive nature, like full on display. But still, I have noticed maybe a little bit more health for him moving forward.
Good. All right, well, that's what Kevin liked, what Kevin did not like. Let's jump into your Twitter questions. The first one's going to come from Jason. Kevin, what was the biggest factor of the loss? Colts turnovers, bad officiating, or both on the Pittman jump ball interception at the 10-yard line?
Well, I would go turnovers. Yeah, I mean, I know people are a little bit up in arms about the 2 pass interference penalties. I thought the Rock one was a call that they make.
Yeah.
You're on an island, you grab a jersey. I'm sorry. I mean, it doesn't get more blatant than that. When you're out there, again, on an island, you cannot have a grasp of a jersey. And he almost had it like in a fist. It was like he looked like one of those high school girls that has too big of a shirt, and then they put it up in a rubber band or something like that. The jump ball, that was a hell of a play by Winfield. Winfield's a good player.
Yeah,
really good player. Jump balls, I think when you have a 6-inch height advantage, you probably aren't going to get that call. And I know it looked like at times he kind of climbed his back a little bit. So, a little bit of that, I think it's the underthrown ball there. If you lead him a little bit, you probably avoid that. Certainly Winfield doesn't get a chance to make that play. But, Rodgers did a great job of pinpointing his interception. Isaiah Rodgers does a great job identifying the ball and making that pick there. So, turnovers. I mean, folks, the Colts entered Sunday with 10 turnovers in the year. That's 10 committed turnovers.
Yeah.
They had 5 in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You had 10 on the year. You had 5 in the game. Like, before you want to find out where Frank Reich lives, can we not just start there? Like, that is, these guys get paid millions of dollars. We can hold them accountable as well. 4 real turnovers. But, that's where I'm going, Jason.
Kevin, David, and John kind of have the same sentiment. How is it still not clear that Frank Reich, that Jonathan Taylor needs to touch the ball a minimum, and that's stressed a minimum of 25 times a game? He's our best player. We did the Bucs a huge advantage by taking him out of the game and for a huge chunk of the second half. Once we finally gave it to him, marched down the field, got a touchdown. I know the Bucs have a good run defense, but the Colts took their own best player out of the game instead of forcing Tampa to do it. Love the podcast. Keep up the great work.
Appreciate that, guys. I want my best player touching the ball. We talked about the Derrick Henry thing earlier. Mentioned to you the conversation we had with Jeff Saturday this morning about edge. And it's weird, Chris, because I think Frank Reich, more than anyone, he is usually, I am sticking with the run game in years past, I should say, because he is a big believer in a boxing match. And, Frank, at times, I think he walks a fine line between, and I know people have kind of gone both ways on this. There's a lot of people out there that think Frank Reich is so in on Carson Wentz that he thinks Wentz is Mahomes or Rodgers or whoever, and he's putting too much on Wentz's plate, because he loves Wentz so much. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's something I'll definitely listen to. It's probably a debate more to have, I think, later in the year, into the offseason, but, it's something I'll listen to. But typically, he is a full-on believer in the boxing match analogy that is so often used in the run game. It's not always going to be clear as sledding, and there's going to be some moments where things get rough. And it just seemed like he went away from that thinking yesterday. 4 carries for 2 yards in the first quarter. That's awful.
Mm-hmm.
But in the second quarter, I think officially, I want to say Taylor had 4 carries in that second quarter, averaging over 5 yards per carry on this 4 quarter, or on those 4 carries.
Right.
So boom. I mean, okay. Is that some light? Is it? And that's where if I'm Reich, I'm getting on the headset with Wentz and saying to himself, all right, if the box looks 1 number off, let's still give it to him, because that dude can make people miss.
Yeah.
And he's got to touch it. So I kind of go back to what I said earlier, Chris. You were moving it passing offense-wise, but you also were playing with some fire in just the long down and distances. The run game can kind of get you into some more favorable situations. And I know the long down and distances didn't end up biting you turnover-wise, but I just feel like Tampa got into some pass rush situations, were able to make some plays there, and I mean, ultimately, you scored 7 points in the second half. The only time you scored was when Taylor touched it. What do you have? 8 carries on that drive?
Yeah. I think it was the entire drive, right?
10-play drive of 75 yards.
Yeah.
He had 8 carries.
Yeah.
6 first downs. Jeez. Yeah.
And that's the thing. He, as we know, as Colts fans, he can mix it up.
Right.
Like, in terms of his speed, like, he can be patient, he can juke, he can sprint. Like, he's a different type of running back, and I think that's the biggest thing that frustrates people is he's different.
Yeah.
Not many guys you can look at and say, that guy's different.
Right.
That guy's different.
Yep. Preach. I think all of that is spot on. Your best players have just got to touch it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Got to.
All right, another kind of dual question here from Luke and Sam. Neither of them really blame Coach Reich, and like you talked about a little bit earlier, they don't feel that necessarily, Reich's to always the one to blame during this game because the 4 turnovers or the 4 times in critical moments the ball was turned over. However, his approach needs to be explained a little bit more in terms of why we keep giving up double-digit leads. What's your thoughts on that?
Boy, I think it's a great thing that I'm curious about. Obviously you're doing something good to build those leads.
Mm-hmm.
And again, 9 straight games with double-digit leads.
Yeah.
But not holding on to them, yeah, man, that's where is that? Is that your game plans aren't evolving for the course of a game? Do you lack that step on the throat mentality? I think those are both fair things to wonder.
Mm-hmm.
The offense produces at a high rate. I think right now the Colts are top 5 offense in points, but it just seems like more the total package in finishing off those games. So this is something that I wish I had a better answer on. It kind of goes back to the playoff teams. I think when we had that question earlier in the year of why can't the Colts beat playoff teams, to me it was your quarterback's not top 10 and your defense isn't top 10.
Right.
That's kind of what you boil it down to. I think if you ask Frank Reich, he would say something similar to that. But when you look at this approach right now, man, it's just – and really it's the Baltimore – like Tennessee games, you had the awful turnovers by Wentz late. But that lead went away pretty quick, in that game. That wasn't the case Baltimore or Tampa. You held on to those leads into the second half. I mean, you're on the verge of a 3-step lead or three score lead on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you there. But, I think at times, Chris, Frank is so inundated with the play calling that do you miss the opportunity to influence the game in other ways? I know that might sound weird to say for a head coach, but like when I say that, partly is like the Taylor usage. Scotty Montgomery decides running back playing time. I feel like if Frank was removed, and again, I think Frank should call plays, but like this just goes to show, like when you are the head coach, there's a lot more on your plate than just calling plays. If Frank Reich doesn't call plays, there's no way he's sitting on the sideline and doesn't realize Jonathan Taylor's touched it twice in 30 minutes. I mean, there's no way. Like, look at Bruce Arians, a great offensive mind. Who calls the plays? Byron Leftwich. It's just like when you can step back and see the big picture over the course of a 60-minute game, just think you have a better grasp on all 3 phases and trying to put those teams away.
Quick interjection here. I know up in the press box they have the TVs on. I don't know if and you've probably already gone back and rewatched the game. Olsen at one point when the Colts were up big said that Frank Reich's not one to shy away from. If a play works, you kind of scratch it out and say, all right, that worked. Now let's move on to another. He'll keep going back to it until the defense stops it. Do you think that was kind of a little bit of yesterday?
Yeah, I think what it really boiled down to is he wanted to attack those corners.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big key. And he just felt like the run game was tough sledding, which that second part is what is a little bit frustrating to me of like, you ran into a wall in the first quarter. You then kind of broke down that wall a little bit in the second quarter, and that's what can happen with the run game.
Yeah.
And then you ran through the wall in the fourth quarter when you went back to it. So you just didn't take, to continue the wall analogy, you didn't keep on trying to knock it down. You just stopped, and you still moved it. But in trying to get the knockout punch on a short week, Vita Vea is not playing 100% of the snaps. He's 347 pounds. You can't be doing that. So, yeah, that's a good point. I thought Olsen was decent.
I thought he was too.
Yeah, it's kind of a different voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got he's very much a.
I enjoyed that.
Kind of towards the end, he kind of gets to a whisper right at the end.
Yeah. I can see where you're going with that. He does. So yeah, the Fox crews we don't usually get, but
yeah, no,
it's a nice listen.
He's better than some of the crews that we've had this year. So
right, agreed.
I'll take it. All right, this one's from Craig. Hey, Kevin, another frustrating game. In your opinion, what's the bigger issue? Reich not giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor until the fourth quarter, or all the turnovers feel like they kind of play into one another? If we had run the ball a little bit more in the second half, could have eliminated many of those turnovers, strip sack, 50-50 ball, etc. And also, is it me or are Pascal and Hines really having down years?
Yeah, let's stick with that part of the question since we have talked a lot about Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Now, again, Hines, at times, I think his usage has not been where it needs to be. You know, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, the Colts had 69 offensive snaps. I think it broke down to 45 for Taylor, 24 for Hines. I need to go back and look. I don't remember them being on the field together. Excuse me. 49 offensive snaps for Taylor, 25 for Hines. So that means 74 total by them. So
they had that one where they moved Hines in motion.
Yes.
To see what the defense would do and swing it out. But I think that was, the only
they're
time.
on the field, it looks like, for 5 snaps. I mean, 5 of 69. I'd like to see a little bit more than that, just with how creative you can be off of that. Pascal down year. You know, Pascal is Zach Pascal played 95% of the snaps yesterday. 7 targets, 2 catches. You get me on the field that much, you can't be a liability. And he was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Not a word you use often with him, but I think lately he's been that. And again, it kind of goes back to the whole wide receiver in March. Felt like it should have been more of a focus. You know, I know T.Y. had a couple nice plays yesterday, but T.Y.'s not. He's not the same T.Y. I mean, we know full well that. So, Pascal definitely a down year. I'll be curious to see how that free agency plays out.
Yeah, and especially the way that he started the year. I mean, the first 2 games, I should say.
Right.
In the start. Right. I mean, you felt like there was some chemistry there?
He plays too much to not have ball security. You know? Yeah. And like Pittman early on, you know, kind of stumbling out of his break, and the timing on that 3rd and 2 wasn't great when Pittman dropped. You know, it's just those guys are on the field too much to be, you know, not counted on as dependable. Now, Pittman, I think, made up for it over the course of the game. Pascal did not.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, throwing this one up to you. Chris feels like Frank Reich is truly brain dead during crucial moments, especially with not giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor at the right amount of times. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think I've said a lot. I guess my 2 biggest takeaways from the run game, Chris, that I really want to make sure I make clear to people. 1, don't let people tell you the Colts are running into a brick wall for 60 minutes. They were not. They ran into it in the first quarter. That was a brick freaking wall. That was tough. But that second quarter, they started to get through that wall. So that's number 1. Don't think that, like, they couldn't run in the first half. No. They couldn't run in the first quarter. They ran it in the second quarter. Secondly, don't let people tell you that all of a sudden Tampa started to have a soft box in the fourth quarter. You go watch that final drive of the game, final touchdown drive, I should say, for the Colts. There were some loaded boxes. Somebody passed along the PFF numbers to me. 8-man boxes. You know, how many times the Colts had them first half, second half? Very similar. They just had more production against them in the first half than they did in the second half. Now, eventually you got there with that run game to end it, but don't, I know those are 2 things. You're like, did you see it was all 8 or 9-man box? First off, 8 or 9, that's a massive number. That final drive, that was a whole lot of 7 and 8-man boxes that you still ran it against.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to the special teams here. Patrick and Joe have similar questions in regards to punt returning and kick returning, especially with the muff punts by Nyheim Hines, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. Do we change our punt returner? And if we do change our punt returner, what's the difference between a punt returner and a kick returner? Like, could Isaiah Rodgers be the punt returner?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say your punt returner is a little bit shiftier. Obviously, ball security is massive when you're a punt returner. But I'd say a little bit more shiftier, just kind of laterally, side to side. Some of the returns are, can you just make that first guy miss and, get 12 yards? Whereas your kick returner probably a little bit more straight line speed. So Rodgers, I guess, is a name. I'm trying to think of the guys they also have put back there during training camp. Honestly, I think it's just kind of a lot of reliable guys. Well, usually reliable, I should say. Pascal, I know, has been back there at times, and so is TJ Carey. So nobody really stands out. I know maybe I should look at like Deion Jackson, the Duke, undrafted kid. I don't know if he did that at all in college. But yeah, I assume they will stick with Hines. I do. But yeah, I think that's probably a good question to throw down on the old question list for the week.
This one comes from Jake. Frank Reich not using Jonathan Taylor in the third, or Matt Eberflus playing off coverage on Brady with a 3-minute drive. I'm assuming he's asking which was the biggest key.
Yeah, Jake, I hated that defense so much late. I need to go back and look exactly about how off it seemed like there was an easy pitch and catch there to Evans on that. Did Cameron Brate have kind of an easy pitch and catch as well?
He had one down the seam, yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. Brate had a first down. I guess Evans didn't really have one. Godwin. I think that was a catch and run, though, with Godwin, if I'm not mistaken. So, it really was just kind of dink and dunk on that final drive.
Yeah.
It's tough to get home with that pass rush, but I don't know. Did you have a feeling that you're like, all right, Brady's going down the field and we're going to lose the game? I didn't have that feel as much as I thought I would.
I had faith in the defense, especially like you said. There were a decent amount of times where our defense got their hands in the passing lane or Brady threw the ball short.
That passing offense for the Bucs early on, something was off.
Yeah, and it's one of those where you would think, and you know what, we can all blame my buddy Danny. He texted me earlier in the week and said, if we can stop Godwin and Evans, they have no rushing offense.
Right.
And I said, well, Dan, because he's the worst better of all time, I said, you know that Fournette's going to go off now. And sure enough, 4 touchdowns.
He looked like top 5 pick. You talk about a grown man. Fournette made he made some plays there. The other thing I think back on an early play in that game, but just a play that you circle is Rock dropping that interception.
Mm-hmm.
Just a great chance, And you throw in 4 turnovers, and there you go.
Yep. All right, from David, how would you compare the cover 2 defense to the Dungy years in our ability to allow teams to move the ball with underneath passes and dump-offs?
Yeah, David, I know the schemes aren't exactly the same. I would say the phrase that I've always been like, huh? When I've heard it from the Matt Eberflus and that defense is the whole no cover zone. Like there are literally zones on the field underneath routes that they just will not cover. That to me is a little bit different. I would like to start that first line of defense, especially against quarterbacks like Brady. That first zone, line of defense, if you will, that's got to be up near the line of scrimmage. Because, you dink it and get 5 yards at it, you're staying ahead of the chains, obviously. So I would just say a tad softer is what you typically see. And obviously from a pass rush standpoint, you don't have the 2 guys we saw on the stage at halftime. Irsay brought the energy there at halftime.
He did.
I was hoping We Will Rock You would be played, but we did not get that.
And a great amount. It's always awesome to see the veterans that come back for those as well.
Yeah, you had a lot. I know there were some people asking why they weren't on the field. Jake Query was saying, I think, COVID-related. Not everyone vaccinated, so I think that was a reason why they just showed those guys kind of in the suite.
Mm-hmm.
I did find it a little odd that Peyton wasn't there. And I'm thinking, Peyton's showing up to the other ones. I saw he was at the Denver game. I don't know if he was getting honored at the Denver game, but I know that Peyton did a whole lot for Robert's career, but I also think Mathis closed out a few games as well to help out.
Oh, for sure.
Peyton.
And walking in, watching Dwight Freeney hit the anvil, and you kind of look at him like, man, some of these guys look like they can still play physically.
So you think Vinatieri for the New England game on the anvil?
That would be awesome.
And
I'm going to piggyback off that because Sizzle has a question about the Patriots.
Okay. All right. Throw it at me.
Do you think the Colts have this game circled, especially Chris Ballard after his comments about the rivalry being continued after the Josh McDaniels debacle?
The rivalry is back on.
Yeah.
Sizzle, it'll be the biggest game of the year. As the game moves along, as the season moves along, and you see how each game, what it means, and obviously you had a huge game on Halloween against Tennessee, and that was big for the division. It's crazy to think, Chris, at one point there, probably like 3 o'clock, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, the Colts might have a shot at this division. It was looking like that. Now the magic number is 3, just to clarify for anybody out there. I did think we had a division question, so maybe I'll hold off on that. But look, it's a big game here in Indianapolis, but I don't think that Patriots players go to Tim Hortons or wherever. I don't know. There's probably another coffee play. Tim Hortons is more of a Buffalo.
Tim Hortons more Canada, Buffalo.
Yeah, but I regret the air I just said. Wherever they go to buy coffee, I don't think the venom for the Colts is as extreme as the venom here for the Patriots.
No.
Like Colleen Bowen, she doesn't hate a lot of people. That's my mother. She hates Bill Belichick. Hates him. You know, I mean, look at him. I mean, the dude is, those hoodies are just.
There are some guys that you just.
Oh, man. I mean, the Colts fans hate Belichick more than Brady, right?
I mean, at this point, probably because his allegiance is still with the Patriots. My mother texted me yesterday, being the solid Catholic mother that she is, "Don't boo. That's that's unsportsmanlike." I was like, "Mom,
man.
Me booing is far less than what Tom Brady's probably going to hear from people sitting behind him on the bench."
Yeah, I mean, the game means a lot, certainly for the Colts. Yeah, I mean, Ballard a little bit. Josh McDaniels is still on that sideline, so I'm sure there's something there. But, like, you know, ask Mac Jones about the rivalry. Ask Matthew Judon about the rivalry. I mean, there's not much, obviously. You know, and as much as we want it to be a rivalry, Chris, you know, the Colts haven't beaten them since 2009.
That's what I was going to say. You ask those guys about the rivalry, they're going to say, what rivalry?
Right. What rivalry in terms of we haven't experienced it much? And then, like, they're a legitimate fan. Okay, so 2009, I would have been a sophomore in college, freshman in college, sophomore. That's the last time the Colts have won. Yeah. There's a whole lot in Kevin Bowen's life that's different than what it was back then. So, but man, that's a big one. And Saturday night, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not.
That's one, man. You rank these final 5 games. I think the Raiders game means more. What Colts fans need right now. Start cheering for New England to win. I know it sounds crazy. Start doing it. Start cheering for Baltimore to continue to win. And start cheering for Kansas City. You want the division leaders to run away with those divisions, beat everybody behind them. You want Buffalo in the wild card mix because you got the head-to-head. Mm-hmm. So that's what you want right now. Or, like, you know, who do I cheer for? Like, last night, Baltimore beating Cleveland, exactly what you wanted.
Exactly.
You know, you don't have the head-to-head, obviously, against Baltimore. So, you know, I know we're 5 weeks out and, hell, 6 weeks out, I guess. The Colts have a bye. How does scoreboard watching work? I think that's what you do. And honestly, in a weird way, like, you probably want to start cheering for, like, is Cincinnati 7-4?
Cincinnati is.
I think they might be.
Yeah, 7-4.
Okay.
After a beatdown yesterday.
So do you have the standings up?
I do.
Who else is 7-4?
7-4. You got Kansas City, Cincinnati.
Okay, so they're a wild card, or they're a division team. Kansas City
and Buffalo.
So Cincinnati and Buffalo at 7-4. Like, you want Cincinnati to beat Cleveland, to beat Pittsburgh, to beat Baltimore, or not beat Baltimore, but to beat Cleveland and to beat Pittsburgh. Yeah. You know, because, you know, they're already above you. It's like, okay, they'll take up one wild card spot. You know, you just don't want the North and the West to one team wins 1 week, the next team wins the next week, the next team wins. You know, you don't want that. You want some separation to start to occur.
Right. Yeah, you got to have the Raiders and Broncos, like you said, start to go down the list as well. Okay, 5 more for the podcast. We got a pun from Wake Spike. He couldn't help himself. Has Blankenship sailed for the Money Badger?
Has Blankenship sailed? Oh, my gosh. That is such a dad joke. It took me a while.
Yeah.
Gosh, that shows you where my brain's at. Yeah, I mean, Badgley's the guy, right? 45-yarder, is that what he hit yesterday? Yeah. Yeah, Badgley's the guy. I mean, it's weird, dude. The Colts just don't attempt long field goals.
No.
Like, Colts do not attempt, like, 52-yard field goals very often, if at all. So, yeah, Badgley's the guy. I assume Badgley will get one game of, like, a miss or two. Man, if it's weird, if you're Hot Rod, if you're a Hot Rod and you're healthy, aren't you like, hello, cut me? Like,
yeah,
let me go somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah, that's weird. Badgley's the guy, though.
He's kicked yeah.
I just like how the ball comes off his foot.
I do, too. I kind of, you know, you're a golf guy. I kind of equate kicking to, you know, the way people swing sometimes, and you can just tell the way he strikes it.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, Kevin, this one's from Conroy. Did Mac and Indy, Marlon Mack, he's saying, agree to mutually just leave him on the inactive for the rest of the year to maintain health so he has a chance to go to another team in the offseason?
So they're asking if there's a mutual agreement between Mac and the Colts to be inactive. No, I don't think that's happening. He's got no role. There was a game earlier in the year the Colts had 80 offensive snaps, and he played one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't play special teams, and we've talked about how much Taylor and Hines need to be on the field / touching it. So, no, that's not the case. If you have an injury, Marlon Mack is playing.
Right. And it seems like he's still a great teammate in terms of Hard Knocks, like seeing him with the running backs and all that. Like that's fun. It's good to see.
Right. Now, Mack is a rare breed. Good dude.
And back to Hard Knocks, this one comes from Adam. He wants to know, last week's episode, Bubba Ventrone was going over the differences between Buffalo, letting the guys know that, hey, this returner puts the ball on the ground, and this is how we need to kick off to here, and yada, yada, yada. Does something like that eventually land him as a defensive coordinator job, whether it be for the Colts or somewhere down the line?
Wait. Bubba's going to go from special teams coordinator to defensive coordinator?
That's what they want to know.
Oh. No. I would say no. I don't see that. I do think Bubba Ventrone is – there's a reason Frank Reich has had him be the interim head coach when Frank has, I think, been at a funeral or had the COVID earlier this year. So, I think Bubba Ventrone is thought highly of, I believe, and like special teams to head coaches. Wasn't that John Harbaugh?
Yes.
I do think that's something that you do see. So, I like Ventrone. I think he's got a little bit of a kind of a unique presence on this staff. Marcus Brady and Frank Reich, I think, are pretty similar. Even Matt Eberflus. Eberflus might be a hair more demonstrative, but I think Bubba's got a little bit of a spunk to him.
Yeah.
You could tell he played special teams and was a really good player. Well, I think him and Brady had a big embrace after the game. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
Former teammates.
Yeah, and it's nice to let's be frank, when you're sitting there, watching film for hours and hours and hours, it's kind of like when we were in class. You're not going to soak up everything someone says. They knew right away on the sideline. Mo Cox is like, Bubba said he was going to drop it. So obviously it was something that they harped on.
Yeah.
All right, from Yash. Hey, Kevin, really appreciate everything you do and all your hard work. Dumb question for the pod. Can the Colts still somehow win the division?
Well, yes, I guess mathematically. Again, that magic number, which is Titans wins, Colts losses, combination of that, I believe is 3. Will you pull up the Titans schedule, if you don't mind, Chris?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure the Titans have an easier finish to this season. Now, we'll obviously see how things play out here for the Colts, but rattle me off that Titans schedule.
Okay. They host the Jaguars.
And they got a bye this week, right?
Yes, their next game is the 12th of December.
They're so banged up.
They got
the Jags.
Host the Jaguars. Head on the road to the Steelers, which at that point we might want them to beat the Steelers. Then they host the 49ers, host the Dolphins, and then are at the Texans.
They got to get 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
I guess if they only get 1, who knows? But let's say they get 2 there, then, the Colts would have to win out to get the division. So, yesterday, man, when the Colts had the lead, I thought to myself, oh boy, are we going to have to start talking about the division? But, Titans are so banged up.
Yeah, they are.
They're about to set an NFL record for the most players playing in a season.
Really?
They've got 82 guys playing a game, 83 guys playing a game. The NFL record's 84.
Well, their running back yesterday was a practice squad guy who took off for that touchdown.
It's like IU Purdue. IU Purdue on Saturday was walk-on quarterback, walk-on running back for both teams. Granted, Purdue's walk-ons better than IU's walk-ons, but that's what it feels like with the Titans right now.
All right, last question comes from Jason. I know the running game has been phenomenal, and so does everyone else, which is why Wentz is a bystander all alone as Jonathan Taylor is gashing defenses. That's my point. With a mobile quarterback like Wentz, why aren't the Colts using design fake handoffs and let Wentz run? I know he gets knocked for his injury history, and the respect for JT leaves Wentz with no one else in the picture.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I do think Wentz's legs can be more of a weapon. You wonder about. I think Colts do a really good job on those run pass options and short yardage where you can give it to Wentz, or excuse me, you can give it to Taylor, or it's like Doyle right there in the flat, or it's Granson is also running kind of a short route as well. I do think those are some kind of interesting wrinkles that they have off of that. So So, yeah, I do think that's something that, and, maybe that's just kind of in the back pocket of like, hey, we haven't shown it all year. We're going to show it, late in games, things like that. Or I should say late in the season.
Yeah. All right, that does it for Twitter questions. Unfortunate loss, but we got the Texans next week, so hopefully we can bounce back.
Yes, he is Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Like he said, the Colts have the Texans next week, and then the bye week. We'll still do a bye week podcast. We got enough kind of questions that we've saved. I think a little bigger picture that we can ask during the bye week. So, appreciate everybody tuning in to this edition of Kevin's Corner. Hope you guys had a great week, and we'll talk to you next week on Kevin's Corner. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.